So I want to address some of the fears and concerns that a lot of owners have. Oftentimes, folks feel lonely or uncertain or a little bit cautious. You put your blood, sweat, and tears literally into building an entity, and it could be that you're the founder. It could be that you're G3, 4, who knows? But regardless, as the current ownership team, you feel that burden, that responsibility. So what do you need? You need often a succession advisory team. It's like jump starting your car. You can't do it by yourself, and sometimes. So you need a process that's going to prepare for transition. A common example is you've got your attorney. It's a multidisciplinary team, right? The succession advisory team. You've got your attorney who's going to help with your will and your estate and your legal matters, thankfully. And I think that they vary by state. So if you've got multiple ownership entities in different states. You need to be intentional about that. Secondly, you've got an accountant or somebody who's managing your cash flow and your liquidity and your capital assets, not only for tax purposes, but that person's part of your team because they need to make sure that you're being fiscally responsible. And third, you've probably got some kind of wealth advisory team. If you've got more than a million in investable assets, you should have multiple wealth advisors. I do. And the point is, you get them to talk to you and your loved ones about what options exist, not only for investing, but for savings. And I guess a third factor is so that they can teach your kids or next gens, your successors, the skills that they need to develop. We're never taught these or adequately taught these. We're sometimes discuss them. Um, so I want to make a couple points and I want to give you some numbers that are useful for many owners. You probably know that your biggest expense, your biggest operating expense, is probably 60 to 80% of your business. It's 100% negotiable. And what am I talking about? It's people, human capital. So your salary and your compensation. Often, family-owned businesses do not have a performance management plan or a rubric or a way to be simple and look at talent assessment. Who's strong, who's not strong? What are the gaps and what do they need to develop? That's one reason why people hire me to accelerate the succession advisory team and look at succession from an objective perspective. There are self-reports that work. I've developed a 360 assessment that really is transformational for a lot of our clients. As an example, one owner had 8 people on a senior executive team, and only one is a family member. He wanted to retain all 8, and he wanted them to advocate for the one, his son, to become the next successor. Well, it was only through that 360 assessment process over time, which I think is about 6 or 8 months, and direct meetings monthly, I think, for 2 days with all the individuals involved, that they were able to learn the skills that they needed, not only to identify their strengths, but to recognize the strengths in those who needed to stay. In that process, eventually, 2 of the 8 left, and that was a success. One was not committed and led to some costly mistakes. And the second didn't believe that the phantom stock shares were an adequate incentive, and they weren't from my seat either, and went elsewhere to another family-owned business where he could have more equity. So when you think about your current costs related to your people, that's your biggest expense. So that's point one. Point two, you need to assess somehow the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities of your business. I can help you with this. Send me an email and I'll send you a market analysis. I do this every year. And I can, in a minute, give you some data about that. Number three, you need to find a team. You need to build your and reference it as Doug's going to stay in his swim lane. I'm never going to provide legal or financial wealth advice. I hire great people to do that for me, and you should too. But I will stay in my swim lane and facilitate the conflicts and messy issues of communication because I'm great at it, and nobody else is minimize that conflict. So if you're interested in saving time or money, we should have that conversation. So let me give you an example. Here's my most recent market analysis notes, and I'm going to write one of those rows across. And also a prompt just to invite you to think about some of the concerns that other owners, just like you, are struggling with, and then how much might it cost, the consulting fee ranges and expectations you'd have. So most of my clients are larger family-owned businesses. Revenue is between 10 million and 100 million a year. You may or may not be in that bucket, but that's okay. Average number of employees could be somewhere between 100 and 500. There could be three, four, five owners. It varies. Sometimes there's active owners and passive owners. You may have 75 full-time equivalents, FTEs. You may have 300, and it depends on your sector. Some of my clients are moving toward more I-9s, 1099s, I'm sorry, than W-2s for good reason. So what are the strengths of that size family business? Brand recognition. People know who you are. You've been around for a while. Number two, you're diversified in your operations. You might have multiple business lines and multiple geographies. Those are your strengths. What are the weaknesses? You've got probably some complexity related to ownership. As I hinted, active and passive, voting and non-voting, like one another and don't like one another, family and non-family. So there's a risk sometime also of losing the family culture. What got you there will not get you there, or what got you here won't get you there. So that implies sometimes various problems. One problem is professionalization. What do I mean? A little structure goes a long way. I'm not implying that you need to be a fully professional organization like a publicly traded company that has compliance regulations that prevent it from being innovative. That's silly. Family-owned businesses are more innovative than not. They generated most of our profit, and they're the backbone of our social capital. I want you to be innovative and nimble and agile in all those good ways you need to be, and as professional as you need to be, and no more. Why waste the time and money? I've got clients who have old computer systems that are more than adequate, as long as they have the cybersecurity protections that are required. So professionalism is one of the problems. Second is managing external competition. How do you deal with the ever-present threats? We all struggle at times to sleep at night. And the third is internal lack of governance. Sometimes we don't know how to make the decisions we need to make. Well, those are the things I can help you guys with. So what do you need? From a consulting perspective, you need some kind of organizational development. That's my career path since 97. And you need some kind of cultural integration. What do I mean? The next gens have a voice. Just ask them. It doesn't matter if they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s. They've got a voice and they expect to be heard, but they're not always heard. So the owners need to make it possible for the next gens to articulate their intentions and desires, not as a threat, and not just because they want to vent. That's irresponsible. I teach next gens to practice self-regulation and good communication skills. Why? So that they can drive the future business, but mostly so that you, as the owners, can finally hear what you've been waiting decades to hear. You've all been waiting for the same thing, which is validation from your kids or successors. I'm ready. Of course, I can make these decisions. I'm more than ready, and here's what I intend to do. We've all been waiting for that. To me, that's invaluable. So now let's talk about consulting costs. There's typically phase one and phase two. Phase one is often defined as assessment and discovery, that sort of thing. And sometimes it's possible to complete phase one in a month, maybe 2 months. And typically for this size business, your investment's between 25,000 and 75,000 for that process. If you've got many more people, many more assessments. If there's a need for a family tree, a GenoPro is a software tool that's often really helpful. If there's a need for a lot of interviews so that people feel included in the process, that's what I do. It's also critical that you get some recommendations, just as when you go to the doctor, you have the diagnosis and then followed by the treatment. That's what I do in phase one. And it's all written and such. Phase two is the consulting fee or process annually. And that'll vary greatly depending on your needs and the size of the business and the family and the complexities. We'll define all of this. So this range is pretty big as well, from 50K to 150K per year. From my seat, that's a small investment. If you're making 100 million and you spend, say, 200K a year for that process, the phase one and phase two, it's a fraction, less than 0.01. So when you think about the consulting investments, you might think, am I representative? Well, most of my clients are in the manufacturing sector, real estate, automotive dealerships, they're in construction, or they're in professional services of some sort. Why? Because that represents 30% of our economy in the United States. And you know these companies. Popular ones that are not my clients include New Belgium Brewery or King Ranch or Bigelow Tea or Mars Incorporated. The point is to think about yourself as a representative business with ownership. You can't solve them by yourself. So just as you've got that a legal team and financial team, my experience is it's critically important that you think about a multidisciplinary team of advisors that'll reduce the loneliness and the uncertainty and the caution that you've got to accelerate the next phase in your business. We do this when we buy new buildings. We buy the land and build the building. In a similar way, that's the structure we're talking about building. It's naive to think you can get there on your own. Do-it-yourself consulting for succession planning is a recipe for failure. So don't try it. And don't ever hire anybody who bills hourly because it's inherently unethical, in my opinion. Attorneys who do so, I think, are inherently unethical. In contrast, if you're outcome based, which I am, and we agree to do this by a certain time in a certain manner, not only will you be delighted if we can do it faster and at less cost to you, but you're able to get the job done that you've been perhaps avoiding for a long time. Those are the kinds of owners I work with. Last point. I've already said, just to review, people are your largest expense. You got to assess your strengths and your weaknesses, your opportunities, and make some investments. Number three, you've got to have a team of experts. Last point is called a learning mentality or a learning mindset or a growth mindset. There's lots of different phrases for the same thing. If you're stuck thinking that our business cannot get past this plateau, then you're probably right, and that'll be the outcome you'll get. However, if you have a hope or a glimmer of hope that, of course, we've got to get past this, our grandkids deserve X or Y, then we should work together. Hope is a quantifiable thing. It's defined as the will and the way to cure cancer or create a reasonable succession for our current assets. Financial capital, human capital, fiscal assets are quantifiable entities that need to get passed on. And in my opinion, your kids deserve it and your grandkids deserve it. So for those reasons, if you're interested, I'd love to work with you. Click the buttons below and we'll talk soon. All your best. Thanks.